and welcome to the Finding Flow Parenting Podcast, the podcast where we help you find more flow, ease, and joy in family life. Each week, I'll be joined by a special guest to explore a question posed by you, my lovely audience. Expect expansive reframes, tools, self-awareness, and a whole load of empathy. Parenting is a wild ride, but together we've got this. So today I am joined by a good friend of mine, Kristen Schmoke, who is a certified parent coach and educator. She's got a master's in education and over 25 years of experience working with children and families. She supports overwhelmed parents in shifting from behavior management to connection-based parenting through nervous system awareness and relationship-first approaches. Kristen's work helps parents to create calmer, more cooperative family dynamics by changing how they show up first. And Kristen and I know each other because we did our training to become parent coaches together. So we go way back. Welcome, Kristen. Hello, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad we get to reconnect. It's so fun.
Great. So if Kristen is here today with me to chat through the question from our lovely listener, which today is all about behavior. And this is such a juicy topic to explore. So this is what our listener has sent in. My 8-year-old son is disruptive and defiant. We lay down the law and set boundaries, but nothing seems to help. This happens at school and at home. No amount of discipline seems to work. What can I do to get back in control? Yeah, so there's a lot of juicy things to unpack in that. So what are your first thoughts upon listening to that question?
You know, the first word that stands out is control. The parent wants to get back in control, which means they feel out of control,
Yeah.
which means they only feel safe or comfortable when they are in control.
Yeah.
And control is an illusion. Control is what we do to make ourselves feel good. But control is never open to making the other person feel good too, because, right, that involves conversation and compromise. And all they're doing is they're in survival mode, protection mode, trying to regain what feels right and aligned for them.
Yeah. Love everything you've said there. And this definitely so much empathy to this parent because it really does sound like they are in a very high stakes survival way of thinking. One of the tools that I've really been loving using with some of my clients is control circles, because often we can feel like everything is within our direct control. And actually, sometimes when we're dealing with behavior from our kids, there's certain things that are somewhat out of our control. And if we're feeling, so for example, like our child's nervous system, right? We can't just immediately fix where our child's nervous system is. So it's maybe not directly within our control. It's certainly somewhat within our control. But when we feel like everything is directly within our control, I think sometimes we can get in a bit of a pickle in our head. And I loved everything you said there about control. What do you think about these words? Disruptive, defiant. What's coming up for you with those? Like defiant. It's quite like loaded emotional words.
Yeah. I mean, I think going back to what you said, like we offer empathy to parents who are going through this because I've been there before where you're just like, oh my gosh, like this child is doing this to me. And and really we have to flip that script and go, wait a minute, all behavior is a message. This child's trying to send me a message and I'm missing the message. So they're getting bigger, they're getting bolder, they're getting more confrontational because I'm still not receiving the message.
Yeah.
So it's more about changing that interaction or that thought that their behavior is defiant and judging it harshly or negatively and changing it to, oh, curiosity. Hey, wait a minute. Maybe my child's sending me a message. What
Mhm.
actually are they trying to say here? And usually I tell parents they're trying to send you a message of they don't feel seen, they don't feel
Mhm.
heard, and they don't feel held in some capacity there.
Mhm.
Not physically, but emotionally.
Yeah.
And so we get to start asking questions that will engage a conversation around those, not in shame based. Why
Mhm.
aren't you? That's not a question, that's an accusation. But you get to have a question of, tell me more. I'm sure there's a really good reason why.
Mhm.
All of these will spark a generous conversation that you can then see a lot more of what's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Meaning, what's going on in their head? What are the things they're thinking about? What are the things they're experiencing? Because parents, we can be quick to judge.
Mhm.
I know my kid. I know exactly everything they're feeling, everything they're thinking, everything they're doing. When really we don't. There's many
Mhm.
hours a day, especially if this child goes to school. We don't know exactly what's happening. And we also only ever know their perspective
Yeah.
when we do hear it. So it's more about asking questions and finding out what are they thinking about? How are they interpreting their experience? Um, and what can you find out more about so that you can offer support if it's needed?
Yeah. I love everything you said there. And one of the things I was thinking when I read this question is sometimes when we are feeling like us and our kids are in this stuck dynamic that we can't get out of. A question to ask yourself is how strong is the connection at the moment? Because sometimes we're so fixated on fixing the dynamic and fixing the child that we fail to realize that actually tending to the quality of connection will actually soften the whole dynamic. And so often, when parents are coming in this survival energy of my child is being disruptive, they're being defiant, their nervous system is just stuck in the red zone, like fight or flight. And actually, something that I talk about a lot with my clients, which can help get people unstuck from that, is this tool called Finding the Jewel. And in Finding the Jewel, this actually came from a client. All my best tools have come from clients. Um, but Finding the Jewel is all about looking at what is the really good thing in the non-optimal behavior that my child is presenting. And you use the word generous. And I think when you're using Finding the Jewel, you're having to be generous. We're looking at the child in the most generous light possible. So perhaps the child who's being disruptive and defiant, a way of finding the jewel might be that this is a child who is expressive, who is
Mhm.
deeply connected to their voice, who is standing up for themselves, who has a sense of their own personal power. Now, things might be imbalanced in how that is coming out in the family dynamic. But sometimes we can get stuck, I think, in this dynamic of like police officer and known criminal. And actually, getting unstuck from that dynamic requires us to be generous. Yeah, what would you add to that or respond to that with?
I love the visualization of finding the jewel because you're right. There's always a diamond in the rough, right? Like
Mm,
there is. That's where the message is. It's buried underneath all of the prickly, all of the big, all of the explosive, all of the offensive
mhm,
behavior. There's that jewel underneath. I love that. And I would just add, you can't find that when you're rushing.
mm,
You
yeah,
have to slow down, and
mhm,
slow down means just stop.
mm,
Stop reacting so quickly to everything your child does. Slow
yeah,
down and have some intention, like, "Is this really how I wanna show up right now? Yeah,
mhm,
my child's behavior might really feel threatening right now, but am I actually safe? Am I
Yeah.
physically safe right here? I'm actually physically
Mm,
safe in reminding yourself that you are. This is your child. I'm going to keep going because I want this connection with them. I want to find out what their experience is.
mm,
And sometimes it's really unfortunate that we actually have to have understanding of somebody else's experience before we can accept their behavior,
mm.
right? It's
Yeah.
amazing. Like that's how empathy works is we were like, we
Mhm.
almost have to have that backstory. And then all of a sudden you go, oh, like, inevitably you'll see somebody on the highway and they're being a bad driver and you're like, oh, they're a terrible person. Well, then if you heard their backstory that they just had this like terrible thing happen to them, you're way more forgiving
Yeah.
of that behavior. And so I don't know. It's just really slowing down is
Mm.
the beginning part of connecting because that's where you can find the jewel.
Yeah. Definitely. And I think what you said there about our body can be interpreting things as threat. You use the word threat there, but actually that backstory gives us humanity
Yeah.
back. And um yeah, definitely with the rushing. But one thing that really struck me from this question was that these issues were happening in school as well. And I think, you and I both used to be teachers, and I think this can be extra loaded when issues are happening at school as well as home, because I think it increases shame on behalf of the parent. And this feeling that things are out of control is exacerbated because you have this social element to it, that you might feel like you're being judged by the teachers. There's so much going on. And I think often what can happen when a child is being disruptive at school and being disruptive at home is that the child can end up feeling alienated in both environments, like they're not being understood, like their needs are not being met in either environment. So, what would be your suggestion on how best this parent can approach the fact that these issues are coming out at school as well? Because I feel like that's so loaded. How can they approach that in a really empowered way?
So what we know to be true about children, and they co-regulate with the adult with them, right? So if the
Mm,
adult is dysregulated, meaning their nervous system's on fire, they're in fight, flight, freeze
mm,
mode, that energy transfers to the child who's not fully developed. And that child goes to school, and it's likely possible that the adult there at school is also a
mm-hmm.
dysregulated adult because
Yeah,
we have we have an epidemic of adults that don't know how to self-regulate,
yeah,
right? And so this child is just being put from one experience to another in situations with adults who are completely dysregulated. So then we're
yeah.
modeling for them how to live life.
Mm,
That being said, if you shift how you show up at home, it actually has a ripple effect.
yeah.
You're going to see if your child feels heard, seen, held in one area of their life, it
Mm,
will also trickle over to the other areas
yeah.
because you're not asking your child to behave. You're
Mm-hmm.
asking your child to cooperate. You're
Yeah.
asking your child to have connection. And those things only happen when they feel safe emotionally, when they feel
Mm-hmm.
seen emotionally, where they're not being seen as broken or something that needs to be fixed
Yeah.
or something that um that that needs to be thrown away because it's not valuable.
Mm, mm,
They
mm.
are value in and of themselves, wholly and just who they are. They are value. You can't give them more value or
Yeah.
take more value away from them.
Yeah.
And they're feeling an immense amount of shame. They're feeling immense amount of judgment. They're feeling immense amount of like knowing they can't do better,
Mm.
not knowing what to do about it. So
Mm-hmm.
there's a number of things. One, how you approach it as you, like who are you being as the parent?
Yeah.
Are you showing up in curiosity? Are you showing up in a calm space? And then two, are you judging your child?
Mm-hmm.
unnecessarily rather than getting curious about it.
Yeah.
Because those things that energy is transferable. You can feel that. You can feel when somebody's judging you before
Yeah.
they've even
Yeah.
spoken.
Yeah.
And you know whether or not it's a safe place to share your innermost thoughts and
Mhm.
innermost doubts about yourself.
Yeah.
How do you it's more about creating that safe space, and when you do it at home, like, all it takes is that one shift, and all of a sudden, that ripple effect it's like a landslide. It just goes so
Mm.
fast and so quickly, and all of a sudden, you can have a very different relationship in a short amount of time.
Yeah. And I think actually that is worth saying. I have seen and worked with families who have changed things in their family dynamic in the space of a month where, you know, I do a kind of monthly check-in after they've had like 4 sessions with me. And it's just something about putting their intention and their attention on deepening their relationship, being that safe space, where suddenly the behavior of their child just seems to have naturally just got a bit easier. And I think it's very important what you said earlier about how we're modeling, how we're showing up, we are how we're managing stress. And one of the things that came up for me there, I think sometimes in the question there was this the parent said that they were laying down the law. And I get this because when things feel out of control, we can feel like we need to be setting more boundaries. And I am very, very pro boundaries. And I would actually say that the more I set boundaries, the more I feel like my kids respect me and the happier our family life is. I truly believe that kids like boundaries because they make them feel safe. But how we go about setting those boundaries is so, so important. So, with that laying down the law, just even in the language of that, there's a hostility. And I don't think that we can change things in the family dynamic if we're viewing boundaries as laws, because essentially the child needs support to meet
Mhm.
the boundary. And with all of this, I was thinking, that child who's in school, who's clearly not being helped by the teacher a great deal, and then at home, perhaps like they're needing support. They're needing help in order to behave better. And this can be a really tricky one that I don't think many people have been given good conditioning around the idea that children need support to meet boundaries. What would you add to that?
Yeah, man, my brain just went like, "Ding," like 50 different ways, but, one, I was hearing, like, this laying down the law as, like, a dominance, like a
Mm,
domineering,
yeah,
overarching kind of feeling,
yeah,
and really, none of us feel good when
yeah.
we feel like somebody is looming over us, always looking
Mhm,
for us to make mistake and always telling us, like, "This is the way it's gonna be." Like, nobody
yeah.
feels good with that. The other thing is laws are permanent. Um,
Mm,
laws are permanent. Like you can never run a red light when you're driving a car, right?
mhm,
Like you're going to get pulled over for that. But boundaries are ever changing with our family because the same boundary that you're going to put with a toddler is not the same boundary you're going to put with a 13-year-old. Those are going to be different things. They're going to be ever evolving and they have like a sliding scale and
mm,
they're not hard and fast. As your child develops, you're going to be changing some of those boundaries. Obviously, you're not going to say to your 5-year-old, to your 15-year-old, what you said to them when they were 5, which is, "You will always hold my hand when we cross the street." Like, when they're
yeah,
15, hopefully they can be crossing the street on their own. Now, I think the other thing is boundaries should be personal,
mm,
right? They should be
yeah,
personal, not something that you're imposing on somebody else.
yeah,
They should be boundaries for you, which is saying something like, "Mommy's working right now. I'll be with you in a minute."
mhm,
That's a boundary. You're not always available at their, um,
mhm,
instant gratification need, right?
Yeah.
You're just saying, "Mommy will be with you in just a little bit." Or even boundaries that are around your family values,
Mm,
right? Our family believes in hard work. So these are the things that we do in our family, like
mm,
chores, like schoolwork, like I don't know, maybe your child has a low income job when they're young, maybe like mowing lawns for others or taking others' trash out or things like that. You can set boundaries around that, but it's usually based in like your family values.
yeah.
But here's the thing, not everything can be a family value.
Mm,
There's a couple that kind of float to the top, and those are the ones that you're going to hang your hat on. But you
mm,
can't have a family value for everything because that's a lot to keep track of.
yeah.
It gets hard to be consistent with. It gets hard to be, um, the message gets muddled with your child. So have some intentionality behind it. Like, what do I actually value? Do I value
Mm,
like acceptance of others? Do I value hard work? Do I value academic achievement? What are your family values?
mm,
And I think that can really help you to decide what are the most important boundaries that you need to
mm.
set in your life.
Yep. And I think I really observe that some of the parents, I include myself in this, that have got themselves in the biggest pickle are the parents who are actually very values driven people who care so much about their values, but they care so much about their values that they can become over controlling and, you use the word dominant there in order to try and keep their values safe. And, one of the things that is coming up for me with this is around leadership style. And I really love this word that Gordon Neufeld uses, which is a natural authority. It's a
Mhm.
natural authority. It's not like a dominant authority of the police officer laying down the law, but a natural authority. And, question that I'd kind of invite this listener to think about is like perhaps think of a really great leader that you have had in your life. Perhaps it's been a boss. Perhaps it's been a teacher when you were at school. Perhaps it's like someone in your community. And what are the qualities of that leader? Because it's the same, children are humans, right? And one of the things that we can get a little lost in is that parenting, as you say, is not dominance, it's leadership. And actually, we want to be inspiring our children to be wise,
Mhm.
inspiring our children to be wise. And we are not going to inspire our children to be wise if we are in that dominant control, survival, panic situation.
Yeah, 100%. When you have a leader who is domineering, who's over controlling, you feel stifled in your own
Mm,
growth, right? But when you have a leader who's modeling and then allowing mistakes to happen and then asking questions like, "What'd you learn?"
yeah,
It's a very different feeling. It's a very different growth experience, right?
yeah,
One feels suppressive and the other one feels expansive.
yeah.
And we really want our children to feel expansive in our relationship with them because the goal is not for them to live with you for all eternity. The goal is for
Mhm,
them to grow up and have independence and for them to be able to experience. And the only way they get resilience, the only way they get the ability to move on is by
mhm,
failure. We learn more from our failures than we do from the things that we do right the first
yeah.
time. Like that, it's that repetitive failure. Um, I just blanked on her name, but the owner of Spanx said that her father every night at dinner would say, "So, what did you fail? How did you fail today?
Mm,
What did you
yeah,
learn from it?" And
yeah.
that was the family conversation. So failure was normal. Failure was expected. Whereas I
Mm,
think sometimes in our culture today, we get wrapped up in failure as being bad, but really failure is where it's really truly where the success lies, right? Because that's where we get to learn and do differently. But I think the greatest thing for parents to do when you have a child that's disruptive, defiant, and you're feeling like you're at your wit's end and you're feeling like you're totally lost it and you just don't even know, is to release the control that you thought you had.
Mm,
Just release it and
yeah.
just just let it go. Because when you can let that go, you're no longer fighting your child.
Mhm.
Your child is going to feel that release, and now they recognize the energy's different, and they
Yeah.
go, "Oh, wait, now now we get to change this. Now we get to my parent no longer sees me as the bad guy."
Mhm. Yeah. Because I think the child needs to see themselves as the good guy in order to embody that. Like,
Well, I mean, really, they are.
yeah,
Two
and they
things
are.
exist
Yeah.
always
Yeah.
at the same time, the good and the
Yeah.
bad. You're just
Yeah.
choosing to see the bad because that's what you
Mhm.
are seeing as a threat, but the good is also always happening.
Yeah.
Your brain is just not looking for it at that moment
Yeah.
because you've trained yourself to see the bad. Sorry, I
Yeah.
get really excited about that one.
I often think that often the parents with who come to see me who have labeled their kids as difficult or defiant or any of these labels, often their kids sound amazing. They sound like the lead character from a book. And, like just looking at these kids through a different lens. And one of the things that I think is I'll take from this experience, I think it's the most important point for me that's come from this experience is this chat, sorry, is growth experience. I love those words. Looking at everything you do with your child as a growth experience.
Mm.
Every behavior is a chance to learn. Everything that happens at school that you hear about is a chance to learn, develop. It's a growth experience. And if you're in that mindset, it's like a growth mindset, right? If you're in a growth mindset about your kids, so much is possible. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. If you want to find out more about Kristen, then have a look in the show notes where there'll be links to how she works with clients, links to her website and her social media. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, Kristen.
Thanks for having me.